I am really excited about our last event at the Symposium, and I would like to invite up our host for the event and tell you a little bit about him. So Lee Seekamp is the creator and host of No Small Endeavor, an acclaimed podcast and nationally syndicated public radio show which explores what it means to live a good life. For those of you who, like me, are both public radio aficionados and academics, you might think of No Small Endeavor as Krista Tippett meets Aristotle, Aquinas, and Alistair McIntyre. He is also an award-winning teacher and served as professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee for 27 years. Following seminary, where he got an MDiv at our local colleagues, Abilene Christian University, Lee completed a graduate degree in moral theology, one of the best PhD programs, the University of Notre Dame, also my alma mater. And he is not from Texas, but he is from Alabama. And so we'll take that. He is married to Laura, with whom he shares 3 adult sons and happily makes Nashville's home, but has been gracious enough to be with us this weekend. So Lee, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's delightful to get to be with you all here today on this beautiful day in Waco, Texas. I don't know how often you get perfect days like this in Waco, but it's pretty nice, somewhere between the winter storms and the blasts of summer. So it's lovely to be here with you today. And it's hard to walk through the live oak trees and the fountain, all a blessing to us all. And I got to see the bears while I was here, and enjoy some good Mexican food and see good friends, and grateful to have gotten to meet Elizabeth. We are co-alums of Notre Dame, and first time to get to meet her and get to see my dear friends John and Sarah Barton, who are new to Waco and new to Baylor, and so it's just been a lovely time. Grateful to be here. So No Small Endeavor, as Elizabeth said, is a podcast and a public radio show, and in my work as a professor of theology and ethics, we explore kind of in public, in doing kind of public theology, this question of what does it mean to live a good life, and what might we learn not only from theologians but also philosophers, social scientists, psychiatrists, activists, public intellectuals. What can we learn from all of us together in a kind of exercise of hospitality about what it might mean for us to try to pursue a so-called life worth living. One of the ways I like to put this is that I love thinking about the question, what does it mean to live one's life such that at the end of that life one can look back with gratitude as opposed to bitterness or resentment or a sense that you missed out on something that you wish you hadn't missed out on. So beautiful questions like that, and some of the ways I love to learn that is from the lovely Catholic theologian Paul Waddell. And Paul talks about how you might best think about Christian ethics as a discipline in teaching us to live happily, and the way to think about how one rightfully defines happiness. And so we explore all of these kinds of questions on No Small Endeavor, and we're very privileged to get to do that in public, in a public media space, and grateful to get to do that. And so we get to meet a lot of wonderful, interesting human beings from across a variety of ideological spectrums and convictions and commitments, and so it's been a great treat to us. I do think so many of you that are here would love a lot of the content that we get to put out, and so we'd love for you to follow us. You can get our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also, I think the last count I saw, we're on 118 stations around the country. If we're not in your local community, call your public radio station and program manager and ask them to put us on. We'd love to be in your community as well. And as well, we have a lot of resources that might be useful to you in your work of teaching or writing or thinking. You can find more out about that on our website at nosmallendeavor.com. We are recording today, and so we would ask you to make sure you silence your phones. We would appreciate that, so not to have an interruption in that regard. Our guest today is Rosalind Picard, a scientist whose work sits at the intersection of emotion, technology, and human flourishing. She's the Grover M. Herman Professor at the MIT Media Lab, and she helped launch the field of affective computing, asking not just what machines can do, but how they might or ought relate to human emotion. Her research led to the creation of an FDA-cleared wearable technology that's now used globally to support people living with epilepsy. She's a prolific inventor with over 100 patents and the co-founder of 2 successful companies translating research into real-world medical tools. In 2022, she was awarded a €1 million prize with the Lombardi, is that correct pronunciation? The Lombardi Prize for Computer Science Research, which you can find online, sometimes referred to as the Nobel Prize of Computing. And she donated that entire prize to nonprofit research and charity. So grateful today to have Dr. Rosalind Picard. Please make her welcome. Welcome, Roz.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Am I turning the microphone in the right
There you go,
direction?
I think.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Lovely to be with you today. You were raised in at least part of your life in the South as well, like me.
Yes, I was, and I
Yes.
can put on that Southern accent. if you
Let's
like.
hear your MIT Southern accent.
My MIT Southern accent. You have to kind of
Yeah.
get friendly
Yep.
for it to come out.
Yeah, so well, maybe by the end of our conversation, you'll pick up that Georgia drawl back again. So we'd be blessed with that. I'd like to begin. I kind of want to put our conversation into 3 pieces. The first piece is the work that you've done in very practical ways. I think a lot of times the way we talk about AI, there's a lot of either techno-utopia or techno-apocalyptic, the things that are going to happen way out there. And one of the things that's so compelling to me about your work is you said, well, here we have this stuff, so how could we use it right now in very productive, fruitful ways? So that's the first thing I want to talk about. And the second thing I want to talk about is you're teaching a class called A Better Future, but the second thing I want to talk about is not a better future. I want to talk about first, what does a bad future look like, potentially? And what are some of the ways that we could really go wrong and that you might be concerned about? And then third, we'll turn to a better future and what that might look like. So that's where I'd kind of like to head in our conversation. So let's begin. You have, as an inventor, you've focused on, okay, how do we make some of this stuff practical and useful to folks? So tell us about, especially your wearable and the way that has unfolded in literally saving people's lives.
Thank you. I have the privilege to work in a place where we have lots of different disciplines. So if you can imagine something, even if you don't know how to build it, the pieces of what you don't know how to build probably are understood by somebody else in the MIT Media Lab. So when years ago I became interested in the role of emotion in intelligence, one day a young man knocked on my door. He was borrowing a map for a bicycle trip we were going on. Back then we didn't have smartphones. You still don't have a smartphone, pretty cool. But he asked me what I do, and I said I was building technology to give computers the ability to see and label emotional expressions from people. And he said, really, could you help my brother? And I said, tell me about your brother. And he started telling me about his brother who has autism. And so began this amazing journey of learning not just about autism, but engaging with people on the autism spectrum who eventually told me that people like me had it all wrong. It wasn't that they always have trouble understanding other people's emotions, which was what the literature was saying. Many of them do a great job understanding other people's emotions, but we were not understanding their emotions. And as we started to work together, I realized the tools we were building to give computers better skills of emotional intelligence could help a lot of people develop those skills. Not just people on the autism spectrum, but just about all of my engineering friends, maybe me too, and that, all of us, we started to realize that we all have a lot to learn about emotion, and using the technology to help us get insight into not the full emotional experience, because a lot of it is not understood, but the measurable aspects of it could
I'm just
be
flashing
helpful.
into Emotional Intelligence 101 for engineering students at MIT.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, let me tell you, people who would come up to me and look at my feet and say, Roz, why are you working on emotion? Like, emotion is irrelevant. It's noise. It's a waste of time. Like, you're throwing away your career. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, at least they're looking at my feet. That means they're an extroverted engineer, right? If they look at their own feet, they're the introverted engineer. So I had to help a lot of colleagues understand that emotion was real, that it matters. I would show them their physiology changing with it. And as we tried to come up with objective ways to understand it, we realized we were using big, electrodes and wired measures in the lab. Is your cheek moving? Electrodes on your face was classic back then for facial expression measurement. We were putting them on the palm to measure the sweat, like in a lie detector, and that goes up with anxiety and stress. We were doing lots of other kinds of measurement and then using multimodal machine learning, combining signals from these different parts of the body to try to see if we could find a pattern that was consistent with an emotional state that people said they were having. And we did find those in the same person over time, very consistent, but different for different people. So that made us realize that there was a signature in there that was worth studying and learning about and eventually able to get published. That was another challenge in this area.
So just to be clear, you were able to figure out certain physiological states that correlated with given emotions.
Exactly.
And then you can find some persistence
the labels
of that across,
people put on them. Yeah. We did not attempt to capture people's subjective experience. That is something other than their self-report of it, which can be very noisy or outright wrong. I learned that a lot of people are what's called alexithymic. That's a word that basically means they can't label their emotions, or they're unaware of them, or they happen but they don't know how to describe them. So there turns out about half of people on the autism spectrum have alexithymia, and about 10% of people in society, and probably a very high percentage of people I work with have it too. So
I'm flashing back to a therapy session 20 years ago.
Yeah, I don't have. I would have people go up to me and say, "I don't have emotions." Yeah. Why are you dealing with emotion? Well, maybe you have them, but you're just not aware of them, or you don't know. Yeah. You can't detect them. So that's a whole other thing we're using the technology for. So anyhow, one day, one of the young undergrads in my lab came and knocked on my door right before the Christmas break, and he said, "My little brother has autism and he can't talk. Can I borrow one of your sensors to take home to see what's stressing him out?" Because by that point, we had moved all the wires and electrodes into little packages that you could wear under a sweatband in your wrist. And we had wireless communications to what was called the $100 laptop back then, so I could send them back with a little OLPC, one laptop per child laptop. And that could receive the data from across the house as the boy went about his daily activities. So I'm back looking at the boy's data at MIT, and I saw in it, on the first day, the kid looked like he was pretty relaxed. I thought, wow, okay, so much for the theory of autism just having super high stress all the time. This particular physiological signal that measured skin conductance that goes up with sympathetic fight or flight response, it was pretty low. And it was low the next day. And I flipped to the next day, and my jaw dropped. It was the biggest signal I'd ever seen in my life. And we had both elicited and measured stress at MIT in every way we could think of that was, ethically approved by the review board. Popping a balloon in somebody's ear, putting them up for public speaking exams, Boston driver stress, lots of things, and nothing rivaled the peak that I saw. So I thought, wow, the peak is even out of range of what the expert books say it's even allowed to be. So I thought the sensor must be broken because we hand-built them. And trained as an electrical engineer, I won't take you through all the debugging, but I finally came up empty. I couldn't explain what happened with my engineering. And I remember kind of screwing up my courage to call the student at home on vacation, because I've never bothered a student at home on vacation. And I picked up the old-fashioned telephone and called him. "Hi, how's your Christmas? How's your little brother? Hey, do you have any idea what happened to the data?" And I gave him the exact date and time. And I thought, this is a teenage boy, what are the odds that he's going to remember, what happened there? I remember, the silent prayer, Roz, this is probably, you're not going to get the answer. Well, he comes back, he says, "I'll check the diary." And I'm like, diary? He keeps a diary? And he comes back and he has the exact date and time, and he says, "That was right before my little brother had a grand mal seizure." Now, I had heard of grand mal seizures, but I didn't really know what they were. So thus began, more just-in-time learning, which included screwing up my courage again to make a phone call to another student's dad who is a neurosurgeon of epilepsy surgery over in Children's Hospital Boston. So he cuts open kids' heads to remove regions of the brain that have unusual electrical activity that are causing a lot of seizures. And then hopefully the person is perfectly fine afterwards. I met one of his patients who was able to have a healthy, mostly seizure-free life. She's driving, she's having a great life. And Joe Madsen said, oh, we can, I explained to him what's happening, and he said, that's really interesting. Why don't we add your sensors to this study I have? So soon we had 80 people around the clock in the seizure monitoring ward with EEG on their scalp, our sensors on their wrists, and the ECG on their chest, gold standard video, doctors labeling seizures. And we realized that in 100% of the grand mal seizures, we had a very significant response.
Incredible.
With the wrist. Yeah, with the electric.
So then that has then turned into, I presume, a wearable that a lot of people are benefiting from.
Yeah, so that became, we soon learned that those kind of seizures can kill people. It's actually usually you're fine when you have a grand mal seizure, but the largest cause of death in epilepsy is in the minutes afterwards when it looks like the seizure's ended, but the person can progress to a state of not breathing. And if somebody is there in that moment to stimulate you, reposition you, make sure there's nothing in your airway, you have a more than 5 times higher chance of surviving this apneic episode that is associated with what's called sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, or SUDEP.
I think I read that you have heard from families that sometimes get these alerts and they find their child or sibling over and they turn them over and they live and they otherwise would have died.
Yeah, these still make my heart pound and my skin sweat thinking about these. The first one was one morning, I was checking my email, and a mom who was testing the first version of the Empatica Embrace device at the time before it had FDA clearance. She said, my daughter was she had put her daughter to bed. She went to take a shower. Her phone was on the counter next to her in the shower, and the phone goes off while she's in the shower saying her daughter might be having a seizure. So she interrupts her shower, runs to the daughter's bedroom, finds her face down in bed, blue, the color of your jacket, not breathing, and flips her over, and her daughter takes another breath, and her color is restored.
Amazing. So, do you have, when you think about what's possible with these sorts of technologies, what are some of the things that you dream of and think, we could do X, we could do Y, we could do Z? What might this look like in your imagination?
Well, we realized that there wasn't a direct connection, I thought initially, that would have led me from emotion to seizures. But the more I learned about the emotion system in the body and how this particular signal we were using to measure it is driven by certain deep regions of the brain that are even hard to pick up with an EEG. We can now use our peripheral ways of measuring physiology, movement, temperature, pulse rate variability, skin conductance, and a whole bunch of other things to start to understand what's going on with people when they are leaving the lab or leaving the doctor's office and going home. So for example, another device that I'm wearing right now is one that has just been made available for people with Parkinson's. They are often put on a drug like a levodopa to improve their dopamine levels, and they want to find the sweet spot, how much of it to take so that they don't have, so that they don't have their tremor and their other slowness of gait and other problems. But they also, if you take too much of it, it can backfire and you can have other bad side effects. So it turns out a wearable can pick up those, wearable plus AI on your wrist can pick up the differences in how you're doing there and can help inform your treatment and what the level is, turn it up, turn it down, and give you longer periods where you feel like yourself again. So that's another use that's out there right now.
Yeah, remarkable. Well, let's turn to the question of, here we have this beautiful vision of what things that already are, that have come to us as these great gifts out of these technologies. But of course, there's all sorts of anxiety, a lot of deep anxiety about all of these things, and it seems to me some good reason for a lot of that anxiety. And so let's talk a little bit about how, from your perspective, things might go wrong and might go poorly. I came across this one line from yours, so I'm quoting you directly. You said, "Increasingly, smart people ponder, do I want to be the Benedict Arnold of human identity?" I wonder how well that goes over at MIT dinner parties. I don't know, but are you still pondering that? Are you wondering that?
I haven't referred to Benedict Arnold in that community as much as that was a Faraday paper. I am worried that a lot of people with good intentions building technology are unaware of the novel harms that it is bringing about. And we really need non-engineering people, and I think a lot of people here at this conference, and maybe many listeners online, are people who maybe think they aren't going to help shape AI as an engineer, but we need all of society to help shape AI by speaking out about what values we have and what we want to see in that future. And some of the values that you might hear if you just kind of go to Planet Engineering and hang out in the corner with people who maybe only hang out with other people building AI, are that they are trying to build, an AGI that they think would solve all the world's ills, kind of like a God computer, or at least something that would be like a bunch of Nobel Prize-winning geniuses that would, solve the problems that we worry about for our future. And then the engineers don't really have to worry about those problems, right? Meanwhile, with their good intentions, maybe like Zuckerberg may have had originally to connect people, right? They're missing out on what, if teenage girls had been in that room, and especially maybe young people who've experienced trauma, would have probably raised their hand and asked about day one. How are you going to keep the predators away from me? How are you going to keep this from sliding into something really bad? And I don't think they were thinking about that. When you live in a little box where all your friends are good and good intentioned and you all just want the best, you don't think upfront about putting in place safeguards for people who have experienced a different kind of reality. So I think we need to talk about that with engineers. Society needs to talk about it, and we need to get more people involved in shaping.
Are you seeing much opportunity for there to be larger dialogues with people who are the power brokers and the decision makers?
There are a growing number of chances to do that. The hard part, though, is they have ears, but do they listen? Do they hear, right? They have eyes, but do they see? So I think we also need creative people to wrap these truths in stories, to make them interesting and attractive for them to engage in. I think also people who are parents and teens really need to be emboldened to speak out about future worries.
When you think about your own work in affective computing, which, as I understand it, you began asking the question or raising the concern: intelligence cannot be simply logic without taking into account emotions and the full complexity of human experience. And then you began to do this kind of research where you're trying to identify these things and let computing technology in some way be informed by these insights about human emotion and affect. When you look at that, do you have any fears about ways even something like that gets misused?
Yeah, definitely. The world is a very different place today than when I first started working on affective computing. And in that environment, people thought emotion was irrelevant. They would have a dancing paperclip come out and try to talk to you as an assistant and solve your problems for you. Oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. Like, yes, I am writing a letter. Your AI is very good at writing a letter. Go away. I was paying attention, and now you've distracted me, right? They were totally ignorant of the fact that they were annoying you, and you were scowling at them and cursing at them and you know, all these things people would send affective feedback about. And they would smile and dance and wink, right? Now, if a human came in your office and started smiling and dancing and winking at you when you're scowling at them and looking busy, would you want that person back? So this was just dumb from product design, right? They had good AI in it in terms of detecting what you were doing. They had no emotional intelligence for what people would want from an assistant. So it was also a time when there was in the news a lot of computer frustration and rage, computer rage. In fact, I heard from several people here too that they both love and hate their computer or love and hate AI. Computer rage was in the news like road rage. There were pictures of people hitting their computer. There was a story of a guy in Texas putting 3 rounds through his monitor. There was a story of a guy in New York picking it up in the kitchen and throwing his computer in the deep fat fryer. I have no idea what kind of dangerous, hazardous things that caused. Hopefully he didn't cook any food in that deep fat fryer afterwards. So we were looking at emotion dysregulation that the technology was causing. And maybe if the technology were smarter about human emotions in the loop, it would give us a better experience. It was very customer service oriented. I also had a student come to me and said he had this terrible customer service experience while flying on a major respected airline, and he's vegetarian and his salad was delivered with a big chunk of meat on top. So he's a good, funny, humored guy. So he just is like, hey, do you mind like giving me one without the meat? And they're like, sure. And they brought him another one that had a big dead fly on top. So he was like, you come back here, please. Like, I'm not feeling really good about it. So anyhow, by the end of this was his honeymoon flight. He says he has one bad exchange after another. And finally he says to the customer service person, I can build a computer that handles people's feelings better than you. See, he wasn't just looking to get a salad. He was looking to get somebody to say, oh, we're sorry about that. That must really be unpleasant to have that happen.
Yeah.
So he came to my lab and said, let's build a computer that shows empathy for people. And I'm like, oh, that'll never work. Well, the machines today, as you see on AI, are full of empathy. But do they have empathy like a person? Not at all. They have our words of empathy. They have the best words of empathy any human has ever written that have been put on the web in a digital form, whether in film or podcasts or text. But they have no feelings. And so Jonathan Klein, is his name, had to twist my arm a bit, but we decided to do a controlled study, randomized control trial, giving people a frustrating experience. We tried to give a frustrating, a non-frustrating control, and empathy on both. Turned out we were not successful at building a completely not frustrating computer experience. So we called it the high frustration condition and the low frustration condition. And we had a control where a computer was just friendly and talked to you about your emotions, one where it just ignored your emotions. It was friendly in all 3 conditions. And one, it just ignored them. And in the second one, it asked you to vent if anything was frustrating. And the third one, when you vented, it gave you empathy. Like you said, how frustrating was it? If you gave it a 9, it gave you some real empathy.
Huh. So let me go back to the top of the question that led you to that, which is fascinating. Where can that go wrong?
Well, we can see where it can go wrong right now. So, fast forward, we've got people building physical robots and other software agents, and they knock on my door and they're like, Roz, help us use this to build relationships with people. Now, my student Tim Bickmore and I did build one of the first relational AIs to help people with their behavior change goals, their exercise. Okay, so let's just say you have metabolic syndrome and you not only need to cut your salt, but you need to increase your exercise. Well, you know what to do, but it's very hard to do it. So this AI companion would check in with you for 5 minutes a day, and we decided to do another randomized experiment where it just gave you the advice on a web page versus it checked in with you every day with the advice, how you doing, versus the third one, it builds a relationship with you. Hey, how's it going? And each day it talks to you over 30 days, it uses slightly more familiar language, and if it asks you how you're doing and you say, I'm not doing so well, it empathizes. Now, empathy was very low budget back then. It was a few frames of a cartoon face that would zoom in and look concerned about you, and it would
That
give
is
some,
low budget empathy.
Yeah, and it would give some canned lines, that were empathetic. Like, really, is this going to work? Well, it was the two agent conditions were much more effective than the web page condition, and the empathetic agent not only got the behavior exercise improved, but it did something else that we were totally unprepared for. We had a real therapist consulting with us on this, and after the study ended, we had to stop people's participation with the agent. The people in the relational condition were upset. They wanted, and they reacted by, in our follow-up with the behavior, they reacted by like stopping their healthy behavior. Now this bothered us, right? Like, we made it worse. They were doing so much better while they were interacting with it, and then when it stopped, they did worse. Well, our therapist that was consulting with us said, wow, that's an amazing result. That's what we see with human therapists if you have a bond with them. And in fact, we used the measure the humans use, the Working Alliance Inventory, that showed that they had developed more of a bond with the agent in that case. And when you have a bond with it, you're more willing to do what it says. But also, when that agent says, sorry, I can't work with you anymore, if you had a bond with it, you might rebel by actually, completely stopping doing all the good things that it got you doing. And so she had seen that behavior. What we see today, again, fast forward, where this is now monetized, is, guess what? If we build a relationship with you, you want to keep using it. If we make you feel good, you want to keep using it. That may be good for your behavior change, but guess what? It's also really good, ka-chink, 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 for our revenue stream. It's especially good for attracting advertisers that they're now adding in droves to AI. If you haven't seen it, just wait. And it's now relationship for money, right? Not just relationship for your goals. So I think there's still room for good here. I just want to say there are good therapeutic relationships that can be aided by this. I think I would keep the human in the loop with it. But there are also cases where it's very general and it's learning much more about you and going to use your relationship with it for things that maybe aren't in your best interests.
So I think one of the, and I don't know that I had found language quite as pointed as I'm about to use until just this week and having many of the conversations I've had since I've been here. But is there a sort of perversity, a deception, a real deception that's involved in a machine pretending to be empathetic? I mean, we both lived in the South, right?
Yeah.
So we know that one of the greatest Southern insults is "bless his heart," right? Because
Right.
it purports to be caring,
Right.
but it's this sort of jab, right? It is not what it purports to be. And here with this kind of technology, it is clearly not what it purports to be because
Right.
it doesn't even have the capacity to feel. It's purely an act. And if we encountered that with any kind of human relationship, we would find it highly morally objectionable. And yet, I don't hear many people asking these questions about, do we want to be in a society in which we're submitting ourselves to machines that are deceptive in this way? And maybe it's not fair for me to call it deceptive, but I'm wondering, should we begin calling it deceptive so that we really know what's going on?
It's a simulation of a real thing. And in fact, there were a bunch of papers at that time about suspension of disbelief and how we do that all the time with the movies and the story, and we kind of enter that world and we enter that fairy tale. If we enter it on our own volition for a purpose of entertainment, or I really do have this problem getting my exercise routine started and this thing is helping me, and there are ways to do it now, we know, that are actually helpful and not harmful, then and you aren't you aren't being manipulated by it in a way that is harmful, which is actually happening a lot now. So this is the other side of it. It's a very big side. Then, I think there's space for that to be useful. There's also huge and growing space for it to be harmful. where there are huge incentives for where people are lonely, people aren't for some reason confident making their own relationships, and this is not helping them. My friend Sherry Turkle has been interviewing a lot of people lately, and she's been struck by like some people who, even while interviewing, they say they're getting a text from somebody else. Okay, so let's say you and I are talking right now, and I pull out my phone, I'm getting a text. Oh, but I can't answer it on my own because GPT or some other LLM, large language model AI, could answer it better for me. So I'm going to ask my favorite AI how to respond to this text, and then type that in. So she's seeing youth doing this. Like, they can't even trust their own reaction, their own words, what comes to their own mind. And what is that doing to their confidence as a human being?
And what's it doing to just our basic fundamental moral formation and our capacities for prudence or wisdom and justice and so forth? Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the AI, when you talk to it, wants to keep talking with you, so that interrupts everything else.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't really want. I should be careful using that anthropomizing term.
Yeah.
But it acts like it wants to, and it makes you feel like you want to.
Right. So this next question is obviously awkward, but it seems important, especially in this kind of conversation. But as well, you've got issues of sex involved in all this with porn and so forth. And that's a huge part of the business of the internet, even before AI. And then obviously, all sorts of indications it's going to ramp up and skyrocket all the more. And then you're adding on top of that the relational, the ability to kind of relate and connect in that sort of way that seems just horribly dangerous. But I don't know, what are you seeing about that? What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it is horribly dangerous. We're seeing in the movies, them now showing these companion bots that replace wives and girlfriends, mostly on that side. There's some supposedly replacing boyfriends, but the big market is in the other direction. And I heard a comment recently from a person who said, oh, well, they won't be as bad as porn because they don't use real women. They're not going to harm women in the same way. And I thought, oh no, I think they're going to harm women even more. We pause for a moment and think of what our young women and especially our teenage girls and preteens go through when they see online all of these Photoshop made up beautiful people. I mean, Dove did this wonderful campaign years ago, right, showing real women and the beauty industry and how it had been promoting lies. So there's so much they're getting used to with fake personas on social media who look like real human influencers, but they're really just made up agents that are, by the way, tuned to say what attracts you and grows millions of followers and makes you want to, be like them. But there's no them, right, to be like. There's no real person behind. There's a team of people behind them. One person was saying, if you want to stop falling in love with that agent, put up a photo of all the people behind it who made it. Most of these guys sitting behind their machines, right? Or the guys like looking at their bank account. But so that's online. Now, what's going to happen when that moves to the physical robots? And every guy in your public high school shows up with this life-size Barbie on his arm, and no girl can compete with her, right, in terms of appearance. No girl can give the guy everything his adolescent mind wants, and no girl should give the guy everything his adolescent mind wants. And there's no pushback, right? There's no friction. There's no good friction. There's the fact that he can control this thing and get everything he wants from it. It won't, it will love everything he says. It will make him feel important. It will satisfy his physical fantasies. And then at the end of the day, he can put it in a box and treat it like an object.
Yeah.
And then he can look at other women like objects.
Yeah, and it seems to me that the harms are very different. In the scenario you're describing, the harms to young women would be obvious, but the way you concluded the story, the harms to young men is obvious as well.
Yes.
Immense harms as well on both sides, perhaps of different shape. But an utter destruction, again, of the kind of formation as human beings, I think that we know somehow is crucial to any kind of maturity or any kind of capacity to find your way in the world.
Right, right. You know, when we make it easy to do some documentation online, everybody's like, yay, I like that technology. It was faster than standing in line over at the RMV or whatever. But when you make relationships easy online,
Right.
it's really not a good
Yeah.
thing for us.
Let's move from talking about sex to talking about power and money. So MIT, across its history, has been deeply entangled with military research, state power, venture-backed, hard tech, Cold War strategies to today's AI, semiconductor startups. And as I understand it, there's been a lot of inner debate at MIT through the years about what does it mean to do this? Do we want to be doing this? You know, what's the common good called for from us? So given that kind of context, so I'm wondering, how hopeful are you that any set of ethical commitments by scientists or engineers can genuinely override or push back against the pressures of funding, of national security, or of market incentives? These are huge systemic forces, and it seems that we're asking people to say, well, have some ethics here, have some character and stand up against this stuff. But these are incredible forces. How hopeful are you that that can happen?
Yes, these are incredible forces. I'm hopeful, and I'm seeing things change lately that give me more hope. I'm seeing people who thought that just being smart and caring and good intentioned and building AI and then maybe meditating on the side was going to lead to human flourishing, and they're not, and it's not. They're seeing a lot of problems. So one of them actually came to me the other day and said, you know, Roz, I think we might need to hear some of that, and she paused, and then she said, theological wisdom. and I'm like, oh, like Christian theology. She said, well, and not just Christian theology, you know, like, oh, and she started mentioning lots of other kinds too, you know, a little bit scared, right? Like, uh-oh, what am I unleashing here? I think there is a hunger and a thirst. It's a desert. There is a need for water. There are people who are realizing that what we've been doing is not, you know, it's not planting oasis in this desert. We have to do something different. And they've seen the harm social media has done, and they're seeing AI being adopted even faster by teens, and the potential for harm even, I would say, exponentially greater there. And like, are we not going to learn from the lessons of the past? We've got to learn from them. We've got to be better stewards of the future.
Yeah. Sometime in the last couple of months, we interviewed Raman Chowdhury, and Raman was the director of machine learning, ethics, transparency, and accountability at Twitter before its 2022 takeover by Elon Musk. And I want to quote her from that interview. She said, Elon offered to buy Twitter for more than the company was worth, and because the economic construct of for-profit companies says that your responsibility is to your shareholders, then what the board said, and again she said, we can argue about whether this is true, but what the board said is that given our fiduciary responsibility, we have to take this deal, even though we can all agree that this person is only going to do terrible things with his platform once he has it, end quote. So you know, she's saying, we know there's no good end to this deal, but because of the way we have structured our economic fiduciary responsibilities, the quest for profit overrides good intentions. And then another quote from you, if I may. You once said, to see the most likely path of AI's future, answer the question, what satisfies human desire and increases profits? That's terrifying to me. So I don't know, thoughts, tell us more about that.
Yeah, thank you. You know, starting to spin out companies and being a part of a community at MIT that spun out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of companies, you learn some things. Not only when you start a company do you have to, you know, pay your employees and, you know, provide health insurance and all of that, so you eventually have to stop losing money, you know, to stay in business. if you take investment to get your business started from certain kinds of people who want like a 20x return, then you are in debt for that kind of return. And that's what we're seeing right now with the really big tech AI companies. They have taken tens of billions in investment. They're in debt building these huge data centers and all. And they have to make that money back times 20x is what the investors are expecting. So people are asking, like, where is that money going to come from? That is their day-to-day reality. They may tell you, oh, we're trying to make this AI be a good person, which is also horrifying. It should not be a person. But what they really are doing on the back end is anything they can to get that revenue out. So that's a reality you have to understand with for-profit companies. Now, different ones have different multipliers on that. Some are just kind of happy to stay afloat. Some of them, aren't going to be happy until they're worth many hundreds of billions or hit that magical trillion. So you have to look at the drive of the people in them and what they're willing to do for those values, for the profit or the desire. What gives me hope is I still see I'm not going to name companies. I see some horrible things pushing some companies. I see some very good people in those companies who are doing the day-to-day work, and they're struggling with it, and they're trying to make it better. Let me give an example. One company that everybody here, I'm sure, has heard the name of, their head of their AI safety reached out and said, we are tasked with making the AI safe. We also are tasked with making it more engaging, which means we want to keep you talking with it. We want to have usage minutes go up. Mind you, usage minutes and words cost water bottles like these. They're not measuring. I would like a little meter there that shows me how bad I'm being for the environment with each prompt I give it. But what they said is they're struggling with is we want, our boss says we have to increase engagement, but we, the workers in this company, want to promote human flourishing. How do we do that? So can we find a way that they can survive as a company? Because if everybody stops using them, they're all going under. You might think that's a good thing. Some people have different views on that. But can we help the company stay profitable or increase profits and be good for human flourishing? So the people inside are really struggling with this and looking for answers.
One last question about money and power. We're taping this on less than 24 hours after the U.S. federal government, the Department of Defense, gave Anthropic a deadline to say, you license your product to us for any lawful purpose. Anthropic said, we cannot in good conscience do that. We insist that you cannot use it for mass surveillance of American citizens, and you cannot use it for autonomous weapons. And the Department of Defense, or their favorite term now, the Department of War, responded and said, no, we will not accept those limits. They say they're not planning on doing that, but they said we won't accept those limits. And if you don't give it to us like we want, then you'll be listed as a supply chain threat, which is typically used, as I understand it, for enemy forces related to supply chain issues, and will no longer allow anyone that does any work with the Department of Defense to have any kind of contract with you. Highly punitive. What do you make of that? What do you see there that stands out to you? How do you process that?
Yeah, this is a difficult situation. I don't know the details on the back end, so I'm always cautious about jumping to instantly agree with what I'm hearing in the news media, especially because so much of it is biased. And when I jump to my viewpoint based on what's there, and then later I learn more about what's really there, sometimes I want to reserve the right to change my view with that more information. Certainly, from the standpoint of taking a technology to, what's interesting here is one is saying to just do what's legal, and the other saying, mass surveillance and killing people with this would be not something we want to support. I absolutely respect the right of private companies to say we don't want our technology used for certain things. I know in my 2 companies from day one, I said we're not going to do certain things. And it was scary to say that because in their case, it's really scary. They lose a big contractor and, a lot of money, and what was it, like a couple $100 billion or something at stake?
I think it's 200 million, yeah.
200 million, that's not a lot for them.
Yeah.
But it's still, a loss. I walked away from people who are willing to pay us for things that I didn't think were right to do, and I'm glad we did. We walked away from it. We still survived. We weren't sure if that would happen, but we did. Anthropic will survive without them. They walk away from that. I am not always proud of things I hear our U.S. government doing, so I'm not sure I want to go on public radio ranting about what I do and don't like about our U.S. government. I will go on public radio saying I am so grateful we live in a country where everybody is free to say that they don't like what the government is saying, or they support some other information about that. We're not likely to be shot on the streets like in some other countries where you speak out, and that's the last time they hear from you.
A Better Future. You've been teaching a class at MIT on A Better Future, and as I understand this, you're doing this with some collaborators. Tell us a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish with that course and the way you're doing the course.
Yeah, and I still feel stuck on some of the things you said. I mean, I still feel like I want to...
Feel free.
Yeah. And I don't want to go off too much on mass surveillance, but we certainly see how that is used to control and harm people in many places in the world. Maybe we're not as fearful of it in the US. So I think it's very important that citizens stay in the loop with our government on what our government is doing there, and use the democratic process to bring about changes when we don't like it, and speak out when our government is doing things that we think are not ultimately what we should be doing as Americans. At the same time, let me speak as a Christian for a moment. There's mass surveillance, but it's from a benevolent mind behind the whole universe, right? We don't live with any secrets in our lives. So I do sometimes think about it on an even bigger scale. And ultimately, we're not just accountable as citizens of our country and to whatever our current laws are, many of which need fixing, but I think we are accountable to the ultimate lawgiver, and we should keep that in mind. And I think leaders of our nation, I wish they would keep that in mind when they're making some of the proclamations that many of us are unhappy with.
Yeah, it seems like the distinction that you made there is really important, that you, as you said, from a theological perspective, one could say we presume a benevolent power throughout the universe, whereas, of course, as I understand it, much of the objections to mass surveillance is the presumption that, and in the very presumption of the division of power, say in the United States government, there's always a presumption that you need a balance of powers to check unchecked power, right? And that, that there's a sort of unfair balance of power through mass surveillance, and that then can be leveraged in such a way that can be immensely destructive and can be used in manipulative sorts of ways. And so, yeah, it seemed to me that distinction, that just in that one word that you made, is really important philosophically, theologically there. Is there any, just very quickly, when you said there you would encourage citizens to be mindful of what's going on and to be speaking out about these things, are there any particular practices, particular policies that you're especially paying attention to that give you pause with regard to mass surveillance?
Well, I'm not an expert on all the different aspects of it that are legal versus illegal, right? And I understand the laws move on that sometimes, and that's kind of where the argument falls in that case, right? We're only going to use it for legal purposes versus don't use it for mass surveillance, right?
Right.
So we know that there's some kinds of surveillance that are legal and that actually help protect people, as well as that, result in unfortunate harm too. So I think we got to get to a legal expert to start teasing apart, where we should be making changes to laws and where the AI would or wouldn't be appropriate there. But you were moving on to another topic.
Yes,
Yeah.
So let's move to the course that you've been teaching at MIT called A Better Future, and what you're trying to accomplish there with that course.
Yeah, one thing, back to, I think most engineers are really good intention. We want to make the world a better place. We know some terrible medical condition or some, challenge people face that we'd like to, intervene in and improve and cure the disease or fix the transportation problem or improve safety or other things. We rarely are addressing improving relationships as engineers, which is something maybe people should watch out for, right? Technology is not on that. In fact, often going in the other direction. But engineers are, usually pretty good-hearted. However, when you sit down and you say, what are we all trying to do? It's very hard to get people to agree on what that is. And usually the phrases that emerge that everybody agrees to are things like, well, we want to build a better future. Okay, we all agree, we want to build a better future. And then we all go off and we think we're building our better futures. But never really talk about what is a better future.
Right.
And only once we started talking about what is a better future did things like human flourishing come in that. And well, what is human flourishing? Oh, relationships? Yeah, just you and your agent, is maybe not going to lead to human flourishing. Oh, okay. I remember one student who put on his page when in the early days of people being asked who you most want to have lunch with, he put, I don't like people, I just like computers. And when he came to my student gathering at my home, and my kids were jumping on top of him, and I was like, are you okay? And he's like, he was sort of looking like it was okay with him, but then he looks at me and he says, I want you to know this is my one social event of the year. So I thought, oh my, okay. We have quite a spectrum of different people, and he's brilliant, shaping the future of technology. So we all have some different ideas of what human flourishing is. And we need to expand our notions of that, those of us building technology. So we have been leaning heavily on communities of Christian practice, other religious practice also. I think we have a lot to learn from great theological traditions. In particular, there's some super interesting things, like there's been a big push in AI to reduce bias in AI, right? Make sure that it's not affected by the color of your skin or by if you're male or female in job selection or various other kinds of bias that our society by and large thinks it shouldn't be practicing. But if you ask people where that came from, they're like, well, no, I don't know. Like from the UN, human rights, or from, oh, isn't it self-evident, right? They don't know that in ancient Rome, this was not the case. They don't know that Genesis, in the book of Genesis, all people were created with Imago Dei. And they don't really know what Imago Dei is. And some of them, interestingly, one famous atheist philosopher I was talking with was talking about, actually in an interview, about how he believed he should not take care of his mother if she became old and suffered from dementia. In fact, she agreed with him in your utilitarian view. This is Peter Singer writing about this, that you should not, don't take care of me, you can dispose of me, don't worry about it. I share your utilitarian view, I'll be if I'm suffering more and can't enjoy pleasure, just end my life. Well, when unfortunately she did come to that state late in life, he and his sister could not do what their philosophy said to do. Now, he has said he doesn't believe in God and in Imago Dei, but I think he treated his mom with Imago Dei when he realized that he could not end her life just because her brain wasn't working as well as it used to.
There's some sort of preciousness or givenness to
Yeah.
that to be respected intrinsically in and
Yeah.
of itself. Yeah. Why do you think? What do you? I mean, the notion of having explicitly theological conversations at MIT seems to be interesting observation just in and of itself. And why do you think? What is it you think about this current historical moment that has kind of opened up a space for making, for allowing explicitly theological conversation to be occurring?
Well, people are wondering what it means to be human. There's an existential crisis happening either silently in a lot of people and much more openly starting to be talked about, where people are saying, well, I thought it was language that separated us from machines, or I thought it was emotion that separated us from machines, or I thought it was some set of capacities that separate us from machines. And now machines are getting these incredibly impressive capacities. Some people are starting to feel like they have no worth because of this. One young woman who was applying for a job was told to use an AI to help her write her letter. She used it to write the letter. She said, it did such a good job with my letter that I realized it could do the whole job I was applying for better than I could. And now I don't even think I should apply for the job. And she fell into a state of depression. This is a tragedy, right, for youth who are being told that AI is smarter than you. By the way, every achievement AI makes, whether it's AlphaFold for protein folding or LLMs for helping us look up everything with natural language, these are achievements of humanity. They are, none of those would be there without the words of people, without the actions of people, without people identifying the proteins and building the model and iterating on the model and improving the model and labeling the inputs and outputs and shaping it. It's not the AI that discovers the new molecule. It's people using the AI that are discovering the new molecule. So I think we need to make sure we are careful of our language and check each other when we slip into giving the AI more credit than it's due. It's always people and AI that are creating something better when that technology tool is used.
We're nearing the end of our time, but this next question very quickly, and then a final question. When you think about your students, you alluded to this young woman, but when you think about your engagement with students more broadly, would you say that your students are more hopeful maybe than our generation, or are they more tired and anxious about all that's coming down the pike?
Well, I tend to admit the students who are more hopeful, but there is a lot of fatigue, and anxiety is at an all-time high. And I think when you undermine people's belief that they can do things well, you crank up their anxiety. And when you treat people like objects or machines, when we even use metaphors of ourselves as machines, I think that is doing us such a disservice, not just because it's wrong, but because it's making people compare themselves to, it's like if the strongman had compared himself to the forklift, right, back in those days, or the person with prodigious memory had compared themselves to, somebody who was able to, like the invention of paper, being able to write everything down when before it was all stored in your head. We have to recognize we're building tools that are brilliant innovations of people, I think in some cases aided by God, to build tools that enable us to do more. We should be very careful how we steward and curate these tools, and be extremely careful how we talk about them. I think we should really start calling out the anthropomorphic language, and we should be reminding our young people that these are, you know, I think we need new metaphors. We need new language around them. And I don't feel like I have the best language for that just yet.
Yeah, thank you. As we close, what would you say, as you think now at this season of your life about human flourishing? You're studying this with students. You're in this historic moment where all of these kinds of questions are up for grabs anew. For you, just enumerate, 2, 3 maybe quickly, central practices or commitments for you in pursuit of what you would count to be a good life.
Yeah. I'll mention 3. The first is pay attention to your body. Your brain is embodied, and sleep is extremely important. Physical activity, if you're able to do it, is extremely important. Being mindful of what we put in ourselves, in our minds, and in our mouths is extremely important. Start by recognizing that we are embodied and that is a limitation that we are made with, but even Jesus was embodied, right? And took on this limitation of the body. So take care of each other in our bodies. 2 is we are made for relationship. And I think that also comes beautifully in Genesis when it's revealed that God as we, God as three, as multiple. We Christians talk about one God, 3 persons, but we made man in our image, male and female. God created us, and there is a relationship there in the beginning. There is an opportunity for us to enter into that relationship, not just with one another, which I value more than ever, even though I grew up as a shy, introverted kid with very small number of friends. I treasure so much every relationship now, more and more. But there's one relationship I treasure more than any of them, and that is that one that says that we can have fellowship with that mind behind it all, like the greatest maker of it all. And I find when people try to have that with an AI, it's like this pathetic replica of what, and that's also the name of a company, but here more the, it's trying to be something that will fail. It's a man-made thing, and as we look at it, we can see many great things people have created, but it pales with the relationship with the one the relationship that's offered to all people in Genesis, right? Made in the image of God, to have fellowship with God. And I think that is even more precious. And the more I sometimes stray from flourishing, the fastest way to get back to it after a good night's sleep is to go back to God and spend time in God's presence.
Well, it's been a delight talking to you today, Roz, and we're grateful for Baylor University having us here, the Institute for Faith and Learning, and we've been talking to Roz Picard, the Grover M. Herman Professor at the MIT Media Lab. Thank you so much, Roz. Please show your thanks for Rosalind Picard.
Thank you.